Hey, what's the matter, you?
So this is intended to be another thought-provoking conversation, not a sermon. I've been wrestling with this question that probably touches a lot of families. Can something motivated by love still produce harmful results? And I believe that this has become sort of personal after seeing different kinds of family support that have brought both genuine relief and sometimes has created dependencies. And I'm not going to go into specifics. I'm not trying to, bring out the specifics of individuals. I think that this is to just learn from and to consider and then to go forward to assist in trying to realize when help can hurt. And so how do we carry another person's burdens without carrying the responsibilities that they must learn to carry by themselves? Can sincere love still produce harmful results? Have you ever helped someone and later wondered whether your help actually made the situation worse?
I think this purpose perfectly describes toxic compassion. I think we see a lot of very far left positions that have good intentions, and we've seen this in a lot of areas. It's no different than Dr. Spock's overdoing self-esteem in kids. You can overdo self-esteem where everybody gets a participation trophy, everybody's amazing, and then you raise a generation of invalids.
Right.
You know, like, and I'm on a much more localized, intimate situations where I can clearly see times where I've helped others and I have seen the unfortunate results of where it was harmful, uh, just because of circumstance that it ended up bad. Uh, and I don't think it was to a long term extent. It was in trying to help where it ultimately hurt the person. And I think that, good intentions matter, but consequences matter too. And love needs to examine both in order to be appropriate. Um, and so, even just something as simple as repeatedly paying late fees, you know, to solve somebody's apparent crisis, but it prevents the lessons that are required to budget your finances, to just try to bring it down to something very common.
The
And that,
difficulty is in this situation, it's almost never one size fits all. The real problem is not in giving to people, because there are some people who are good people, good character, and have legitimate needs, sometimes through no fault of their own. Take people experiencing ridiculous medical bills or whatever. Um, However, the problem is it requires a true understanding of the person's character, whether they are somebody who has strong character and strong work ethic and who just fell on hard times, or whether it's somebody who's entitled and looking for a handout. And that is
and so,
really difficult to ferret out.
well, and that's what we'll be going through. So, me, I obviously, my scriptures go into them, and I find it interesting that in the same, like, 3, 4 verse section of Galatians, it says to bear one another's burdens, but yet 2 scriptures later it says, "But every man should carry his own load." And at first these can seem contradictory, but it tells us to carry one another's burdens, but that you have to weigh that against what the difference is when you carry your own load. And I think that there are weights that can crush a person and it must be shared, but there are responsibilities that strengthen a person when they learn to carry it on their own. They're on their own. And so you have to make this distinction between these two. Like Mike was mentioning, a crisis or a limitation that a person can't reasonably carry alone, like a death or a disaster, a serious injury, or even a temporary hardship, is not the same as when a person has to learn to carry with appropriate support, like just the ordinary responsibilities of working, budgeting, planning, accepting consequences. So, uh, so I think that it's important to make that distinction. Healthy help builds capacity, whereas your it's the situation, like Mike you were mentioning, that when somebody's carrying a crushing burden, and that's compassionate, but permanently carrying that load, well, now that person hasn't learned how to stand on his own feet, to grow from the situation. And there is a distinction. um, you know if it's a disability, if it's a trauma, if there's grief or an addiction, well, those things, that's when the person might need some assistance. But you have to learn that that person can also do it on their own, and that's what's important.
Yeah,
Help.
I have a little bit of a controversial point of view on some of this. I actually think that the notion of agape is a harmful concept. The whole notion of agape, which means unconditional love, I think is a ridiculous statement. And I even say this as a parent. Um, Although I should say there are certain easy examples, like a child or a baby. A baby can't do anything for themselves. You can't expect any responsibility or anything like that. Um, but other than that, other than the most obvious scenarios where that require unconditional love, I think it's harmful because, first of all, I think it's harmful just that you should assume that unconditional love is the best love. I don't think that's true at all. And I don't think there's anything wrong with having conditional love. To say that if I love somebody and I give to them, I don't think it's wrong to have them have some responsibility for that. To even pay that back somewhat, you know. So I really, and we see it all the time. Look at how many Hollywood movies where unconditional love is the pinnacle of everything. Love everybody. All you need is love. And I think it's a harmful concept.
I would definitely agree. I think that that's very wise. Unconditional love is, I think, is irresponsible, and it's not coupled by wisdom. And wisdom in itself would conclude that unconditional love is foolish. So, and and
I
so,
think
yeah,
I think Hollywood and we as humans we like to peddle fantasies. And this is a fantasy to peddle, no different than the soulmate fantasy. There's only one right person for you out there in the entire universe. And your goal is to keep looking till you find that one right person. When the truth is, you can basically fall in love with almost anybody if the timing is right.
But you were saying
I,
that there are some times where unconditional love, like a baby or a granddaughter or whatever, for a time period that there is unconditional love. So there's a time and place.
I would agree.
Or
I think
like
it's
when you're
clear.
rescuing, or like if you're rescuing hostages or you're rescuing people that are about to die or something. You're not trying to say, "Oh, I'll only take this guy." Or you're trying to help everybody unconditionally.
Yes, I do think there are cases where it is 100% appropriate and you have no expectations. And even there are some times when you have you have to take a chance. You have to leap first. But and sometimes you do even give unconditionally, but it's kind of like what Joe's saying here. You do it as a starting point, not as a continual thing. In other words, I'm also a big believer in the three strike rule. If you screw me three times, don't expect me to be there the fourth, because it won't happen.
Yes, I just wonder to the extent that it's truly unconditional then. I'm not saying that you shouldn't be selfless and sacrificial, but I believe that there are conditions when we give it to even a child in the extent that we're looking for an outcome from that child. And so yes, it's unconditional love that we're giving a child to raise them. And I don't, I'm not trying to get into the subtleties of the difference, but again, I believe those are the outliers, and I'm talking about more towards, our daily living. I mean, a person on the street that has a flat tire, you help them out. I mean, that's unconditional love, right? I mean, it's you're not expecting them to be like, oh, when your tire flattens, I'll make sure I'm not. So, I mean, I don't mean to say that we don't do unconditional love, but I think that this is towards people that we're considering in respect to relationships that we have, and and trying to help them, and where someone would say, well, if you love me, why aren't you helping me? And I think that's when I'm trying to clarify between these two balancing acts of, you know, yes, help them when they have a burden, but don't help them when they have a load. And making that distinction between, sure, if the situation demands it and you're about to get thrown out on your feet, and I remember Paul came over, and his wife's teeth were like, oh, she was in excruciating pain. It wasn't even a question. Here, take the money. I'm not going to watch this lady who's now got dementia and is crying like a baby because her teeth were all in pain and you don't have money to fix it. I don't just take the money. It's just no. This is like, please. And then he paid me back like tenfold. So, but so I do believe that the situation could mandate that even though that person could be a drug addict, maybe you don't want to get thrown out. But after that, you have to step in and start resolving the problem. But most of the time, people, they also want to take the easy way out. And here's some help. Well, I don't want to really help you, so here's some money. And then, you're in trouble again, here's some money. And it could be a lot of different reasons that we start to fall down that path. But enabling begins with relief, not bad intentions, to give ourselves an immediate crisis. But then all of a sudden there's a repetition and the same problem returns and the rescue becomes expected. And then eventually there's dependence, that the giver works harder than the person being helped. And I think that that's when the signs start to become clear that we're crossing over into now becoming an enabler.
Yeah, or codependency. You see that a lot in that. There was a show where they always would confront people with drug addiction and they would have like an intervention, it was called. The show was called Intervention. It had a lot of seasons. And 9 times out of 10, it was someone in the family was helping the drug addict have just enough to get by for decades, and then they wanted to have an intervention.
But
And then
most
codependency
enabling,
is that person, you're helping that person, but you're also receiving some love back. So it's a codependent relationship.
Right.
Joey, I
yes.
think you have a fan on your mic because I keep on hearing something. Unless it's me, I don't know. If it's me.
Okay, let me just try to move it. And I don't believe that enablers begin with the manipulation. I don't believe that they set out. I think it develops. Um, I believe it starts with compassion, and I think it develops from there, from the immediate
It can
release.
also add purpose to your life too, right? I mean, it adds something. Someone is dependent on you. That's adds a purpose to your life. It fulfills you in some way.
I think it's a little bit darker though than that. I mean, it can be purpose, but I think it's a little bit of selfishness. In other words, you get those strokes by being the hero all the time. Look, I'm coming in. I'm gonna save you again, and I just saved you last week. And aren't I so great? So they're getting those ego strokes by doing that codependent behavior.
Yep. Yep. I think that we're all on the same page there.
I don't think it's nefarious, like Joe's saying. It's just it takes probably develops over time, and maybe internally you're getting that dopamine hit, like you're saying, like you're getting that. I'm doing good. In the end, they'll come around somehow. If I just keep helping them, they'll come around eventually, and that doesn't happen a lot of times.
Well, I mean, I can't tell you how many times Mom used that same exact words with John. Exactly. They'll come around. Yeah, he never did.
Yeah, I mean, she used to use it with Frank also, and I don't think he ever came around. I think that lady stepped up when he was in dire need, right, and helped him when he was back from Arizona. Um, so, what type of love was that? She really helped him out, and I think she was doing it to expect something back, but obviously, it wasn't that he would come out of it. Most of the time, you need help to a certain extent, to some extent, even if it's like tough love. Uh, I think that's another form of love when you realize that it's gonna take, that not only is it helping, it's also helping in a form that they may not understand as help at the time, but ultimately it turns out to be help because it's what the person needed, which I still think is a form of love. And obviously they call that tough love. Uh, so obviously, again, the scripture says, one who is unwilling to work shall not eat. You're not supposed to carry these after it's not a crisis, after it's avoidance or entitlement or refusal. Well, then you step in and you say, out of love, now I have to do this, which you may not agree with, but is obviously still uh, what is appropriate and still could be construed as love. So where does support cross the line? Uh, is it a burden or an
Too, though, has even extended so far, and I think unfortunately too, it's sort of a form of, and I'm going to talk more about delusion, but it's sort of a form of societal delusion. I mean, look at San Francisco, where you got all these ghouls and zombies, and because the weather is nice, you literally have thousands and thousands of people who have checked out of society, literally refuse to be productive members of society. And San Francisco gives them enough. They used to even be providing them with drugs, but they give them just enough enablement to keep them on the streets. And I mean, to me, it's just wrong. I mean, every self-help or really person who knows drugs always says the same thing. And I do not consider myself a drug expert, but you always hear the same thing. They will not change until they hit rock bottom. You always hear the same wisdom in terms of drug addicts. They will not change until they hit rock bottom. And here we have society because of compassion, although it's wrong to compel my tax dollars for your, what I would say is misplaced compassion. But anyway, in the name of compassion, they enable them just enough to stay on the streets. And it's disastrous. It's failed. They haven't reduced the drug problem. They haven't reduced homelessness. It's only increased.
I do believe that this same criteria can be applied in an individual, on any one of those people, I don't think they're even looking for help at that point. I think that it's that same story that I had over when we were thinking we were helping the people at the zone down in South Phoenix. And we were bringing food from one of the food pantries that they had left over. And we didn't take it into the commissary there. We parked on the side of the road and we were going to hand it out to the people that were on the street. And they were all drug addicts, openly and blatantly doing drugs right on the street. And so we thought that we would help them by giving them food. And the police came around and stopped us. And they said, don't do that. And you could see the line was forming, and they were starting to become a pretty significant line. And he said, this isn't the way to do it. You need to bring it inside. And I'll never forget, I was with Everett Higginbotham, and Everett said, you know, you pretend to be a Christian. He said something like that. And the police officer really turned back and leaned into him, saying that you're not helping these people. You think you are, but you're not. They get 10 to 12,000 calories a day free given to them. They don't want to get off the street. They want to keep doing their drugs. All you're doing is enabling them. The people in the commissary, there's about 200 to 300 families. They need the food. They want the food. They're the ones that are requesting training, getting the tools, and contributing effort to getting off the street.
Right.
And
I mean, think
so
about it. They're chasing the euphoria. They're chasing the thrill of the drug
Yeah, but
cult.
you can't ignore that there are deep societal things that are also involved. That are the whole war on drugs thing is a bullshit, and it's a fucking farce. It's not solved anything. It's only gotten it worse. There are so deep societal, psychological.
Whoa, buddy, you're doing your own presentation there.
Well,
Keep
wait a minute.
on.
No, I
That's
want to
the
hear
part.
I want to hear the point though. What
The
I mean,
point
I
is
think
that
more
though,
of-
it
That's
isn't that I'm not disagreeing. I'm not disagreeing with that. These people are lost and that maybe they
That's
are complete drug addicts and they want to stay on the street. But I'm just saying that there are some deep societal flaws that also bring people to that point where they might have lost their home or lost a loved one and then turned to drugs and then never got psychological help or never got any kind of treatment or never did. How most people that are on the street are actually veterans. A huge percentage of the people are veterans that didn't know what to do when they got back to the world and just got lost and got alcohol and drugs and then the war on drugs puts away the little guy and then the big guy gets out with a fancy lawyer. That's my point. My point is that there's things that are deeply societal flaws. These people are sick. I don't know if I necessarily believe in the disease theory of it where there it's a disease and they can't control themselves. I don't agree with that. But I also think that there are things that are keeping people in that position.
yeah, it's an interesting point. I think you mixed several points there. Let's try to tease them apart briefly. It's just a few minutes. Um, I think the war on drugs, though misguided, you're right. There's certainly problems there. I don't see how that directly relates to people choosing a life on the streets. But the one point you did bring up, which I think is a good one, is there is a lot of mental illness on the streets, and mental illness.
But do they really choose it or has it become just a lifestyle thing? I mean, I don't know if they're saying that this is how I want to live. Now, there's probably some outliers that are like that, but the vast majority probably don't like waking up in filth and don't like the whole thing. They don't want to live like that. It just becomes, well, this is the reality. Am I going to be able to get a job if I clean up and go to it? And how would I get the money for an apartment? How could you get an apartment in some cities? It's $2,000 a month, $1,400 a month. They can't save any money like that. You're in a societal trap at that point.
Yeah, I think what you're getting at, it's an interesting question. Yeah, there's a lot of complex question here. So part of the complexity is you're saying, how do people get themselves in trouble? What are all the different ways that you, in essence, fall into a life of drugs versus just the chasing the thrill? I know there's a certain percentage that are that. I don't know what the percentage of veterans are, It would be good to have an actual percentage. Um, but then the second question is, all right, so let's say you fall into the trap of drug use. And let's say you're legitimate, like you realize it's a problem and you want to get out. What are the assistance or the lack of assistance in terms of getting you to be able to get out of that trap? It's a fair point.
I'm going to try to take this back to.
Sorry, I didn't mean to do that. I just had thoughts and thoughts.
It's always good, it's hard because, that's a big can of worms, right? I mean, holy cow! Yes, I'm not disagreeing with what you said. I don't have the time to unravel that to the extent that I would love to. I've tried to help people. I've been involved with a few to a pretty extreme extent, and it was that they wanted to just keep doing the drugs. So I don't have the experience of dealing with veterans personally. I do know
It says 5% of veterans. That's what it says online.
How many?
5%. It's not a majority, but it's 5%.
Yeah, I didn't think it was, but it's important to get the percentage. And 5% is clearly a small thing, but still, your point is still valid in this sense. There's a certain percentage that are the young kids and the people who are thrill seeking. So there's a certain percentage of thrill seeking people who got there on the fault of their own. There is a certain percentage of people who had some kind of personal tragedy and fell into this as a way to cope. So that to me is an important distinction. You got thrill seeking and you got coping with tragedy. And I think that is an important distinction.
I don't know how hard it is. I know that there are programs, there are low income housing, there are, to a certain extent, there are a lot of jobs with respect to, obviously you're working with your hands, you're not making that much, I don't think it's all like where there's no way to get out and off of the street. There are programs. I think they're overwhelmed. I don't think that I'm not saying there's not a waiting list. I think that it's very difficult, and it's obviously this is a problem. Although again,
I think there is a bootstrap problem, and part of the problem is when you think about it, the amount of help they need is inordinate. I mean, it's just like everything from counseling, the food. You almost need to take them from the baby stage, and it's very difficult.
That's one of the biggest, hardest parts with drug addicts, that they do have a mental illness. It was one of the big problems with Edward. You can only help to a certain extent, and otherwise it needs to be professional. And it's long-term progress that needs to occur. It's not something that's a quick fix. And again, it's an extremely difficult situation. I think that
they're not obstinate and belligerent and nasty.
The reason I brought up also was with the war on drugs is because it's so funny, because it's a war. It's not, you can't win. It's something that you'll never defeat. It's like the earliest humans were doing drugs. We're experimenting with drugs. There's proof of mushrooms, and alcohol was one of the. How many civilizations did beer and everything else? So we've always been overtaking something. We've always been doing. You're never going to beat it. It's a stupid word, the war on it, because no matter how many people you put in jail, there's always going to be more buyers and more sellers. It doesn't matter. It's never going away. You have to cope with it on a different level. You have to deal with it on some other level.
Right, because it ignores a fundamental principle of supply and demand. And as you said, demand outstrips supply. So to waste government resources when most of the problem is just that there's a huge demand is almost silly.
It's
hard. They should make zones. They should have zones for it.
It's hard. You can't just not have borders. We all want there to be no border, but if you have no border, you're overwhelmed because your country is so much better. And so the system can't support everyone. And so you have to do some sort of conditional entrancing. And if you don't do nothing, if you do nothing with the drug Then they're flying them in and landing nonstop, bringing in the fentanyl. And they're
Plus,
getting to your children, and you're getting into the schools. And you
no,
can't do
besides
that.
border control, and I agree with you. You do need a certain amount of deterrence. It's certainly
That's what I mean.
not a
Right?
good thing. So
Well, you can't just like I understand it's silly to call it a war because it's an unwinnable war. But
Right.
if you do nothing,
Well, right. Or you have zones for it. You have to have like you could have certain zones and certain times.
do you hear the
Certain
newest
areas,
drug
yeah.
now? It puts
No.
fentanyl. It's like fentanyl is like baby aspirin to the newest drug now coming out.
Hmm.
And if you think fentanyl is baby aspirin, fentanyl is like 1,000 times stronger than crystal methamphetamine. And this is like 1,000 times stronger than fentanyl.
What's it called?
Nexamin.
Really?
It's yeah.
not only that, just so you know, there's been lots of districts that have tried laissez-faire, have tried full drug legalization, and most of them have to backtrack. Just recently, Portland backtracked. Portland did no criminal offenses for drugs, and 2 years later they backtracked because it started to overwhelm the streets.
Because it's again you're releasing.
You do need
Just
some
to realize-
rules. You do need some rules, but I just like
It's
how many
tough.
people were in jail for marijuana, and now marijuana is mostly legal. I mean, people had spent their entire lives in jail for weed, a plant that grew out of the ground. Like you could grow it in your backyard right now if you plant seeds. They'll grow. Like that isn't that. Now I can understand when you're saying like heroin and methamphetamines, and like there should be a line, sure, but and then how long do you put people away for? I mean, like, I don't
No,
know.
I think your example of marijuana is a good one. I mean, some people call it a gateway drug, but I agree it's not really that much more harmful, or even maybe some people would debate it's less harmful than alcohol. So I think that's a good point. Of course, they tried to ban alcohol too for a certain amount of time. You know,
And then that's what made the mafia. That's what made the underground. That's what made the organized crime, right?
well,
It certainly
it
helped.
was organized crime since the Romans, but
Right. What I'm saying.
I think they definitely used it and exploited it.
It made them a lot stronger.
It was nitazines. Nitazines are the new one
Night
coming out.
Never heard of that. Damn.
I know. It's
You
the one-
Arizonians always get the new shit.
you know, it comes up from the border. So the closest states.
How many people could that kill? They could probably drop that in the water supply and kill 10,000 people.
So wait a minute, what is it called? Nitazine? What is it?
Nitazines. Nitazenes. It's now 20 times more potent than fentanyl. They've had it around. It's just now it's becoming more and more popular because it's stronger and it stops your heart. And this is now one pill can kill. Now it's just literally try it once and you can die.
Says it right there, 20 times more potent than fentanyl.
And that just depends on the potency that you're putting into the pills. Again, if they are mixing it. So if you just get a bad mix, you're gone. It just stops your heart.
Man,
it's
that's
just
crazy.
like heroin, where it slows down your heart and your heart stops. And it's like you need this other drug, like in fentanyl, you can have this other drug that you can stick into them and it wakes them up. Well, this one you need like 4 or 5 of them, and you just gotta keep sticking them. Unbelievable. It's getting bad. Talk about getting off track. Hard to get back on. Generosity and self-examination belong together. So a lot of times, like Christian was saying, that people are doing it to relieve guilt, preserve affection, feel needed, or avoid conflict. You got to change the form of the help. You have to match the effort and with the training and the support. It has to be a give and take. You have to help the person out of the situation. They have to be willing to want the help. There has to be a balance between helping. That's one of the obvious conclusions. There are typically questions that we can ask ourselves as to whether this is both compassionate and wise, and it's what we were all talking about in respect to, is this a crisis or a pattern? Are they unable or unwilling? And what effort are they making? Will this build capacity? Is it harm or a reasonable consequence? And so I think and that was 11, but, and am I acting from love and wisdom or from guilt, fear, or pressure? And what is the reasonable limit, the end point of this help? And I think that I was trying to make sure that in dealing with situations where there could be potential for even codependency as well as enabling, that there is clear, simple questions that can be asked, that you can determine whether this is falling into an actual need, an actual crisis, or if it's became enabling. And so we're supposed to be, generally, love should never abandon someone in a general crisis. But love must also care about the person's future and their character. And sometimes love carries another person. Sometimes love walks beside them. And sometimes love must refuse to carry what they need to learn to carry themselves. And so you can simply say, I obviously, this tough love perspective of I love you and still want to help you, but I want my help to build your future. I will help with specific goals when you're also working towards them yourself. I will not continue to just give you unrestricted money and unrestricted love. So is there a form of love that we may need to change, not because you love less, but because you want your love to produce something better? And I don't believe
this is very difficult. This is one of the key challenges of parenting, right? In other words, you're looking at your children, you love your children, you spend an inordinate amount of time caring for them and think, but there's times then, especially as they get older, you have to push them. You have to say, you can do this. Even when they look at you and go, but Daddy, I don't want to. But Daddy, come on, I need your help. And then as they get older, it's going to be, but Daddy, you just don't understand. Or Dad, don't be a square. Or Dad, come on, I can't do it. And then you're going to be faced with these kinds of challenges. It's a very difficult thing.
Yeah.
And that's my presentation.
Arrivederci.